right,
Next year.
ready for me to start?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, let's start.
Okay. So my name is Bradley Weeks. I'm a local attorney. My office is in Palmdale, near the corner of M14 and 10th Street West. I know many of you in here. I'd like to know all of you. I surely appreciate you inviting me here today. And just a little bit about me first. I was born in the Antelope Valley, went to Quartz Hill High School, so I've been here for a while. When I was right out of law school, we opened a law firm up in Palmdale, and we hardly moved at all since we started here in 1994. So I do a wide variety of real estate law, and that's how I know a lot of people. For example, if there's a problem on a preliminary title report, I clean those up. I fix title issues, mechanics liens, forged deeds, forged trust deeds, people stealing property. I help people with that. I help people with probate sales for real estate, and sort of general litigation. So sort of anything that sort of is a general real estate litigation issue I can help people with. But we also do a lot of evictions, and I've done more evictions in the Antelope Valley than anybody else. I've been filing evictions up here since 1994, so I've seen a lot of changes. And a lot of
for me so far. Thank you.
a lot of what I get called upon for agents relates to landlord-tenant, and we have sort of an open phone policy. Agents that have a question for me, maybe for a client, then I'll take their phone and help you out. So, but here today we are here about evictions, about landlord-tenant law, and about the new rent control ordinance, which is one of the most dramatic changes in California law in the last 20 years. And I like to start out with why I think it's important you as a real estate professionals understand this area of the law. Because if you understand, if you have this knowledge about the changes in the laws, the changes in the rent control laws, you can give better advice to your clients, and you can help them out, help them to make their important real estate decisions. That is one of the most important things you do as an agent. And the more you know about this area of the law, the better advice you can give, the better you're a trusted real estate advisor. And then when people come to you with important real estate decisions like buying or selling property, then they'll come to you and you can help them with that too. So I believe it all helps out. The more people we all know, the more agents know about real estate laws, the better advice you can give and help out your clients. And it helps everybody. It helps everybody. Now, I brought a packet here of some things that we do in some other areas. I'll talk about this as we go along. Also, I brought some stress balls. We have a supply of those in the office. People get stressed out when they see a lawyer sometimes. But I brought a bunch of those as well. So now, so the big picture about rent control. And by the way, the rent control ordinance goes into effect on January 1st. Okay, January 1st, 2020. That's when this goes into effect. That's when the law hits. And the general picture, if you had to give one sentence about rent control, one sentence, here it is. If it's a multifamily property, it's likely there's rent control. So multifamily, likely rent control. Single family, likely not. Likely not. So multifamily, probably rent control. By multifamily, anything more than a single family residence. Single family, probably not. So that's the general idea. So if you have someone who comes to you and says, I own a home and I'm thinking about renting it out, do I have to worry about this new rent control? Likely not. Or I own a duplex, or I have a big apartment complex. Do I have to worry about rent control? The answer is likely you do. So that's the top line point. But we're going to talk in some more details in just that. And I'm going to start with the history of sort of rent control in California, sort of the way the law is right now when it comes to rent control. In the Antelope Valley, it's not something we deal with a lot. In Los Angeles and San Francisco and other places, it's a little more of a constant concern. And rent control has been in the news a lot recently too, like in New York as well. So rent control in California, well, first of all, there's no federal rent control. So the United States Congress, has not passed a law regarding federal rent control. So that's really not even within the topic. So it's all state rent control. But historically, rent control has been treated like a local issue, like a local zoning issue. Think of, whether a property should be zoned for multifamily or single family, property should be zoned for commercial or residential, business licensing, things like that. Local issues. Historically, rent control has always been handled in that fashion. And that was true up until now. So rent control is always dependent upon the city. So for example, you could have two houses that are identical, let's say a duplex, and on one side of the line, in the city of Los Angeles, there's rent control. And on the other side of the line, let's say in the county of Los Angeles, no rent control. They're identical properties, same in every way. Same person could even own both of them. But because one is in the city and one is in the county, different rules, or maybe no rent control. That's my point. It's always been city-based. So the rent control laws in the city of Los Angeles are different than the rent control laws in the city of Beverly Hills, and different from the rent control laws in the city of Santa Monica, or Berkeley, or San Francisco. Every city has their own rent control laws, and their own, and if you own property in that city, then you gotta learn what those rules are. Now, historically, we have never had rent control in most cities. There's not that many cities that have rent control, except for example, Palmdale and Lancaster. Palmdale and Lancaster does not have rent control, except what? Anyone want to guess where Palmdale and Lancaster have rent control? Huh? Nope.
Senior citizen?
Nope. Mobile home parks. Mobile home parks. There's the city of Lancaster and Palmdale enacted mobile home park rent control. In Rosemont, you own a mobile home park in Rosemont, no rent control. In Lancaster, rent control. So that's sort of an example of city-based rent control, where just depends where it is. Depends what the cities want to do. And the cities have had it for quite a long time now. So cities can have rent control, but limit it in a fashion. So that is the sort of the background of how rent control is. Now, that was the law until about the mid-2000s. Cities could do whatever they wanted as when it came to rent control, and they did. But in the mid-2000s, around the year 2005, California passed statewide rules regarding rent control. And what these rules did was they limited what cities could do on rent control. So it's kind of like a little different, but the legislature said, okay, cities, we're not happy with some of the things you're doing on rent control, and we're going to limit what you can do. And these laws are still in effect today, although one has been modified. So the first issue of these statewide rent control prohibitions regards commercial property. If you own commercial property, you are not subject to rent control, like office building, storefront property, retail, whatever it may happen to be. The state of California says no rent control. So for example, could Palmdale tell the owner of this building, you can only charge so much rent? No. Could the city of Palmdale tell the owner of the AV Mall how much rent can they charge? No. How about some dinky little storefront property on Palmdale Boulevard? Could the city of Palmdale do that? No. They could pass a law that would be void. So no commercial rent control. That's still the law today. The next important thing the law said in 2005 was if the property was built after February 1st, 1995, no rent control. And that is any property, single family, multifamily, whatever. February 1st, 1995, no rent control.
Everywhere or?
Everywhere in the state of California. So all those big apartment buildings being built in downtown Los Angeles, no rent control. No rent control.
So they can go
whatever they want. Whatever they want. You can charge whatever they want. So February 1st, 1995. Now, oh, and by the way, if you have a question that comes up, feel free to ask me. I'm sure if you're thinking of it, someone else is. Just raise your hand. If it's something I want to cover at the end, we'll cover it at the end. You can ask it right now. I will stick around afterwards as long as you want to answer any individual questions. So,
We had a question.
Yeah.
We hard to hear. You said it's after 1995.
February 1st,
So
1995.
that's why they're tearing down stuff building new.
They're actually, that's kind of a controversial issue. But, if it was built after February 1st, 1995, no rent control.
For both residents and multi.
Yes, any property, multifamily, single family, whatever.
Are you telling us that, is this the current regulation?
Current
Or
law.
what's it going to be in
Not the
2020?
future law.
Oh,
Current
okay,
law.
I just wanted clarity.
Current law.
Question.
Under the current law,
This was a change made in 2005.
this is the change made right now, in January 1st. But under current law, if it was built after February 1st, 1995, no rent control. Okay, no rent control. And it doesn't matter how many units. And that same law says no rent control for single-family residences. Cities can't regulate single-family residences. And we're gonna talk about how single-family residence is defined in the future. And then, most significantly perhaps, for properties that were built before February 1st, 1995, if someone moves out, the landlord can charge whatever rent they want. It's called a vacancy deed. So, let's say in the year 2000, if someone moved out of an apartment in Santa Monica, the city told the owner of that apartment how much they could charge in rent for the new tenant or their vacant unit. That was rent control. The cities regulated how much rent could be charged, even to someone who's moving in.
Wow.
That was gotten rid of in 2005. So that's sort of the basis, that's where we are right now in November of 1990, 2019,
That is really changed.
but it's changing. Okay. But really, the only thing that's changing is, well, most of it isn't changing, but we're gonna talk about how it is changing. But I wanted to kind of lay the groundwork as to where we are right now. So where we are right now is, the only properties that can be rent controlled right now are properties built before February 1st, 1995. But if you are a person, let's say you're living in Los Angeles and you're living in an apartment built in 1990, your life as a tenant may not change materially because you already have rent control. There already is rent control. And the rent control law doesn't get rid of the old rent control laws. So what the new law says is that if the city is more protective of the tenant, by more protective it means lower rent. If the city is more protective of the tenant, then that law applies. If the city is less protective of the tenant, then the new law applies. So most cities don't have rent control. I mean, LA does, and that's kind of the biggest place near here. A lot of the cities in the Los Angeles area has it. And those cities with those rent control laws still apply. Now, how about the new rent control law? Well, the new rent control law changes things around in that it's statewide. Before, this was always a city thing, always something the cities did. So if, for example, the corner of 10th Street West and Palmdale Boulevard, Highland area, that's a county pocket. The properties in that little area are in the county of Los Angeles, not the city of Palmdale. City of Palmdale has no rent control, so people living in that county pocket could have rent control if it's imposed by the county but not by the city, or if someone next door had rent control in the city of Palmdale, they wouldn't be in the pocket. Or, for example, Boron, Rosemont, Bakersfield, anywhere in California, all these cities that never really wanted rent control in the past, like Palmdale, Lancaster, now they have rent control because the state of California has imposed it on everybody. So this issue that was in the past locally controlled is now statewide controlled. The state of California has put in place rent control for everybody, at least everybody that applies. So the first question is, if you're talking to someone about their property, the first issue for you to think about is this property subject to rent control at all? Is this piece of property subject to rent control? And that's where we get into the first big exception to the rent control law, which is if it's single-family residence. If it's a single-family residence, this new law does not apply. With one exception. Okay. So let me ask you a question. Anyone here familiar with Blackstone, that hedge fund in Wall Street that owns like a gazillion houses in California?
Yes.
State of California is familiar with them too. They didn't get much sympathy in the legislature. So, they made an exception for them, basically. But an exception doesn't make so much sense either. If you have two houses, single-family residences, one of these homes is owned by an LLC, the other home is owned by a corporation. The one owned by the corporation is subject to rent control. One owned by the LLC is not. Okay. Now I could be the only member of that LLC. No rent control. I could be the only shareholder of that corporation. Rent control. Why would the legislature make a distinction here? As a lawyer, there's no difference between a corporation and an LLC. They both have limited liability. They both have investor owners. There's no real material difference. An LLC pays higher taxes sometimes, because the LLC pays taxes on the gross income. Corporations don't. There are some circumstances where you can do something with an LLC related to ownership that's more difficult than a corporation. But there's really no material difference. So some people might own the property as a corporation, some people might own it as an LLC. There is no reason to own rental property, at least single-family rental property, as a corporation. Why? It's subject to rent control. Much better to take that exact same piece of property and have it owned by an LLC. We can actually convert a corporation to an LLC. So if you have a client who owns a property as a corporation, like a single-family residence, they should convert it to an LLC because no rent control. If you have someone who's thinking about buying a property and they say, well, I'm going to flip a coin. If it's heads, I'm going to buy it in a corporation. If it's tails, I'm going to buy an LLC. Tell them to pick that LLC. So now there are tax issues that have some concern. If you like deed a property from a corporation to an LLC, there may be capital gains taxes. There might be capital gains taxes. There might or might not, depends when they bought it, some other factors. How also, if LLCs pay tax, state tax, whenever they make a gross amount of more than $250,000 a year. So if you have a piece of property making a gross amount of more than that, then there's some issues too.
How much?
$250,000 a year. Yeah.
You open yourself up for reassessment when you change it?
No. Under the property tax laws, if the ownership is the same, like one shareholder, two shareholders, it should not be reassessed under Prop 13 property tax laws. But there is income tax consequences to that. So, clearly the person needs to talk to an accountant before they do this. We don't want someone to pay a huge capital gains tax, whereas they wouldn't if they kept it in the corporation. And that is frankly the main reason people don't take something out of a corporation, it'd be capital gains tax. Yeah.
If some single-family homes are part of a corporation's portfolio, just part of it, just one element, it's not gonna change from a corporation if they have benefits to an LLC, but can that ownership be changed to an LLC?
The rule is that if it's owned by a corporation, it's subject to rent control, or it's owned by an LLC, or a corporation is a member, it's subject to rent control. So, for example, LLCs, they call them members instead of shareholders. But for example, let's say you have an LLC, and there's two members, John and XYZ Corporation. It's subject to rent control because one of the membership interests is a corporation. Now, I know people, I'm sure everyone here knows some people, who own a lot of homes They're owned by their LLC, but all the owners of the LLC are people, No rent control. Whereas you could have someone who owns an LLC and like another member is a corporation, or just a person who owns one home is a corporation. They're subject to rent control. It's sort of, seems arbitrary. It is arbitrary. It is arbitrary, but that's the law. That's the law. And there's other things too. For example, let's say you had a corporation and you transferred the home to an LLC owned by the corporation. Well, then I guess it would still apply, but then what if you did some other things? I mean, there's some sort of creative planning that can get involved here. Now, most people don't own, if they own a single family residence, most people I come across either own it as their own name or in the name of their trust, or they own it as an LLC and they own the membership of the LLC. So I don't think we're talking about a lot of people here, but I'm sure there are some people it will affect. And especially since it's so easy to change. Yeah.
If the corporation is owned by a trust, and the trust owns the corporation,
Mhm.
that's the trust.
Right, you look at the deed.
You look at the
You
deed.
look at the deed. So if the deed says XYZ Corp, rent control.
I see.
If the deed says XYZ LLC, well, then someone who's fighting it, you'd have to figure out who the membership, the owners of the LLC are. That's, by the way, not public record. Not public record.
You can help with that?
Yeah, we can do corporate conversions. We can do corporate conversions. So that's the big exception. Single family residence is the big exception. But there's sort of a weird way, not a weird way, but sort of not an obvious way that they define single family residences. The way they define, the law defines it is a unit where there is no other person, no other living unit on the property. So what happens, and this is another exception, if there's a duplex. Well, normally that would be a multifamily, duplexes are multifamily properties. But if you live in one, if the owner of the property lives in one of the duplexes and rents out the other unit, like some people do, they want to have extra income, not subject to rent control. So if you have a client who's living in a duplex or thinking about buying a duplex, if they live in it, the unit they're not renting out, no rent control.
Let me give you an example.
Sure?
I have a duplex in Lancaster,
Yeah,
but it's actually like a granny house.
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
I'm totally gonna get to that. That was my very next point. You got ESP. Now, go ahead.
Does the only applies to duplex or applies to triplex and fourplex and above 4 units?
Duplex.
Owner
Duplex.
occupied.
Just duplex.
Duplex.
So fourplex, if the owner lives there, is still not
Or
allowed.
threeplex, or quadplex, or triplex, I guess. Just duplex. The law says duplex. But there is something that we're gonna talk about near the end. So there's an area of the law, or not the law, but area of real estate called accessory dwelling unit. Also called like the grandmother flat, or grandmother unit, or mother-in-law unit. It's where you have a single-family residence. So if you look at the assessor, it says single-family residence. But you build another unit on it. You build another unit on it. Now that sounds like a duplex, and it is in the sense that there's 2 units, but they're sort of regulated differently, they're assessed differently. But if you own a property and there's an accessory dwelling unit on it, then, and if you live in that property and you rent out the accessory dwelling unit, that unit is not subject to rent control. And actually you can go up to 2. So if you got 3, never heard of that, but if you had 3 accessory dwelling units, rent control. But if you have a property and you build 2 or 1 accessory dwelling units, no rent control. And this actually is gonna become more common. I'll talk about that at the end. I think this is gonna become more common. Yeah,
You're not saying that the owner has to live there?
yeah, the owner has to live there.
Oh, the owner has to live there.
The owner has to live
Otherwise, it's rent
So if
Has to
you
be-
rent the 2 units, it's rent
Oh, they have
control,
big.
but if you occupy one and rent one, it's not.
Correct. There's no rent control as long as the owner occupies.
Of course, rent control on the owner, it's not the owner.
So, for example, let's say you have a house with, let's say you're a real estate investor, and you buy this house and rent out both units, but you're not living in it because you're living somewhere else, subject to rent control. It's single family in the sense the assessor looks at it as single family, but there's 2 units on the property, 2 separate living units, so it's rent control. Then, let's say one of the tenants moves out and the owner moves in, now no rent control, because the owner's occupying the property. Okay? Or go ahead.
If a member of, if a family member of the owner happens to live in one, it's still rent control?
It's owner occupied. Owner occupied. I think the statute might actually define owner, include the owner's family with that.
I'm confused by the triplex and the 2 additional ADUs.
Mhm.
How do you distinguish those?
Well, the law, I'll tell you how the law distinguishes it.
Uh-huh.
Because this is brand new, there's been no interpretation of this. The law specifically talks about duplexes. Now, duplexes and single-family residences do not mean the same thing because they're zoned differently. They're assessed differently. If you look at assessment records, tax records, they'll talk about a single-family residence and they'll talk about a duplex. A duplex is multifamily.
Oh, true.
Okay, it is. It's because it's called a duplex on the records. A single-family residence with an accessory dwelling unit is considered single-family. I mean, lenders look at it the same way. Lender will look at a duplex as multifamily and a single-family with an accessory dwelling unit as single-family. It just is part of how the law is and how our society is. Even though both units have two different families living in them. Now, I've never heard of it, more than, go ahead.
You're kind of talking about where they used to call the chauffeur house with, in the back where you had the garage, the chauffeur
Yeah.
right over,
Granny house,
above
or
it.
granny flat.
Yeah.
Maybe
All my clients have chauffeurs and they told me.
That's kind of like the accessory unit.
Yeah, I'm just kind of, I don't know, I'm not really being politically correct here and calling it accessory dwelling unit. That's just what the law is calling it now. That's what the zoning laws are calling it. They're calling it ADUs. But granny flat, mother-in-law flat, all that stuff, it's all the same thing. Yeah.
So if I have, because they're passing that new ADU law where.
Well, I'm gonna get to that at the end.
Yeah, so that's what they're basically doing, because I'm looking at my properties adding ADUs for more rent, but now it'd be subject to rent control.
I'm gonna talk about ADUs at the end. I'm gonna talk about that. All right, so those are the 2 exceptions to single-family residence. So if it is one of those things, then there's an exception for single-family residence. Now, the other big exception is it was built in the last 15 years. So if you have an apartment building, multi-family, whatnot, built in the last 15 years, ADU or not ADU, doesn't matter. Biggest apartment building you might think of, not subject to rent control, if it was built in the last 15 years.
So the year, what year built? 1995?
Well, I mean, every year it'll change, right? I mean, it's not built in 15 years from today, it's built in within the 15 years. So it's when the certificate of occupancy was issued. So if you have, so like 5 years from now, it'll be properties where the certificate of occupancy was issued in the prior 15 years. So the idea behind that is someone wants to build a new apartment building, they can charge whatever rent they want, at least for 15 years. Now the law expires in 10 years, but we'll see. Yeah, yes. So now another important aspect of the law is, as of July 1st, 2020, new leases have to say whether the property is subject to or not subject to rent control. And the penalty for not putting it in the lease is it's subject to rent control. Now, I'm sure Carr will come out with new lease forms. And if you give a new lease,
Only new leases, we don't have to disclose now. With our
no, you have to give notice. As of the 1st, if it's not subject to rent control, you have to give notice within the first 9 months.
It's not subject?
If it's not, well, if it is or isn't subject to rent control, as of the 1st, you are given a grace period to give notice to the tenants.
What's the grace period?
9 months.
9 months.
My advice is to give it right away.
We can get it now.
9 months.
No, I wait till
Oh,
after.
for 2020, that's.
But new leases on July 1st have to have the notice. And the notice is in the statute. I printed it out for you in my packet. It's this one right here, it's in your packet. My advice is, after January 1st, give notices to all of your tenants. If you don't give the notice, there's rent control. for that property.
Oh, if you don't give a
If
notice.
you don't give the notice, there's rent control for that property. If you don't put in the lease, there's rent control for that property.
Okay. What about Blackstone owns a property that was built in 2010?
It's a multifamily or single family?
Single family, but you said single family applies to them, but not 15 years.
The 15 years is for any property.
Any property, yeah, city fine.
So their 2010 house, they would not be subject to.
Anything.
No, I'm gonna check on that. I think it's not, it doesn't apply. But that's an excellent question. You know what, I brought the law here, I'm gonna double check, and I'll let you know at the end. But I believe any property where the certificate of occupancy was issued in the last 15 years is exempt. So, oh, you voted against it?
Yeah.
Last year it was on the ballot, people voted against it. All right.
So if you are to increase for a non-rent controlled properties, if you are to increase the lease on month-to-month basis, is still the 60-day notice
Now you're
applies?
anticipating another thing, it's 90 days now.
It's
I was gonna talk about that.
Uh-huh.
It's not part of the rent control laws. So, all right, so what does rent control mean? What does rent control mean? You know, let's say you got property that's subject to rent control, you got a duplex, quad, apartment, whatever. So, first of all, you can't raise the rent, how much you want it. How much you can raise the rent is controlled, it's limited. And the law is you can only raise the rent twice in any 12-month period, and you can only raise it up so much.
By how much?
And the cap is 5% plus the local CPI, or 10%, whichever is lower.
Twice a year?
You can only raise the rent twice a year, and in a 12-month period, you can only raise it up 5% plus the CPI, Consumer Price Index. So I looked it up. Los Angeles has a local Consumer Price Index. I printed out the Bureau of Labor Statistics gives a report every month. I printed it out if you want to see what it is. It's 3.23% now. So, right, as of January 1st, you could raise your rent 8.23%. That's the 5% plus the 3.23%.
Twice a year.
Well, collectively, you can only do it that much in a 12-month period.
Total.
Okay? So you can do it like 6 months and 6 months.
You
You
cannot
couldn't like do it every month.
Can you do it once a year?
You can raise the rent twice a year, but altogether, you can only raise it now 8.23%. But it's 5% plus cost of living. The cost of living is on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. So, let's say for example, oh, and it's retroactive to March 15th. So you just can't raise all your rents right now. If you did, they'd be cut back to whatever the rate was on March 15th, plus 8.23%. March 15th of this year. So that is the cap. That's the rental cap part of rent control.
And you can find the cost of living on what website?
The Bureau of Labor Statistics for Los Angeles area, I brought a couple examples of that if you want to see what it looks like. And that is based upon the cost of inflation in the counties of Los Angeles and Orange County. So it's a standard metric used, but it's based on Los Angeles and Orange counties. In Kern County, it'll be something different. In Kern County, it would be different. In San Diego, it would be different. Because it depends on where the property is. So that's the cap. Any increase of rent beyond that period of time is void. Now, if the property is vacant, you can still raise the rent as much as you want for the new person. For the new person. So that part is still in effect. So that's the rental cap part of the rent control. Now, the second important aspect of this law is termination of the tenancy. Unfortunately, you can tell the tenant, well, I'm going to raise the rent, or you can move out. The tenant can say, no, I'm not moving out. You can't terminate the rent. In the past, whenever we had a problem tenant, let's say the tenant was always late, let's say the tenant was causing noisy, say a tenant's causing trouble, maybe you think the tenant's doing something illegal or improper on the property, but you're not really sure, tenant's just difficult, then you can just say, I'm terminating the lease, there's a 60-day notice. You know, fine, 60 days, we're done. That was a very common procedure because often the tenant's doing something wrong, but you can't really prove it, or you don't feel comfortable with it, or maybe there's a problem with the property, so you can't really raise the rent, that type of thing. Often, very, very often, we just give a 30-day notice. On a 30-day notice, you don't have to prove anything to the court, except you gave the notice and they didn't move out. That's it, it's very simple. Well, those are gone now. Those are gone now. So, now you can only terminate a lease based upon an approved reason by the law. And now there is a grace period, there is an exception. In the first 12 months, you can still terminate the lease for no reason. The first 12 months the tenant's in possession. And if someone new moves in, there's like another, it's 12 months for that person, up to a total of 24 months. So if you have a problem tenant, let's say the tenant moves in on January 1st, and there's tenants in trouble, make sure you give her notice in November. So you terminate it before the 12 months are up.
So the
That's
first
still
year, as a landlord, you have the right to terminate, but
Yes.
after that, even if, after like, you know, the year, month to month, it's still the same applies, right?
Well, the law regulates it after they've been in possession for a year.
I know, but like after a year, they're month to month, you did not renew the lease for
Correct.
another 12 months, is it the same rules apply?
After 12 months, you can only terminate the lease based upon a reason in the law.
So it doesn't.
The rules for terminating the lease are pretty similar, but you can't give like a 30-day notice to quit, for example. Or 60 days.
So you're saying terminate the lease, but my understanding is, if I were to do a year lease with you, right, and the year comes up, and you automatically go month to month. So you're no longer in a lease, correct?
Well, a month-to-month lease is a lease that expires, automatically renews based upon the prior terms, so you're still in the lease.
I hate that term. It doesn't make any sense, like.
So what does it
So what's-
take to terminate the lease?
So let me give you some examples. The best way to describe this is by example, okay?
No.
So one of the basis, unfortunately, one of the reasons you can terminate a lease is non-payment of rent.
Right.
So if let's say the tenant's been there 2 years, they don't pay the rent, you give them a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. And if they don't pay the rent in 3 days, you're terminating the lease. That's what a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit is. Pay the rent in 3 days, you don't pay in 3 days, I'm terminating the lease. That is still the law. That part really didn't change. So that into the 3 days, that's the termination. And that part hasn't changed much, but it's the other parts that have changed. For example, after 24 months, you can't just give a 30-day notice to terminate lease.
What do you have to do?
Can't. You have to have a reason. And the reason has to be one of the reasons the law is given. So here's some of the other reasons.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the reason.
Okay. And here's the one, it's a breach of the material term of the lease.
What is it?
We can find that.
What does material mean?
We can find that.
Okay. Well, what a material means is what the judge thinks it means, because it's not set out in the law. So if the tenant, no, material means is another word for important. So I'll give an example. Let's say you have, you rent a property to someone, and the tenant, and the lease says no pets. And the tenant has a cat, brings a cat in, and then you discover it and you give them a notice to terminate because they have a cat. Well, what if the judge likes cats? The judge could say, well, one cat, it's a big deal, it's not material. I like cats. What if it's 10 cats? Well, maybe, probably material, right? What if the lease says no dogs, and they bring in a dog? Well, is that material? I don't know. Does the judge like dogs? I don't know.
Is it support dog?
That's a topic for another day. What if the lease says only small dogs? Okay, and they bring in a mastiff. Well, okay, maybe that's material. But what if it's like a golden retriever? It's like a medium-sized dog. Is that material? I don't know. What if the lease says no smoking? They say, well, I only smoke once a week. Okay? These sort of material issues are easy to talk about and joke about, but when you're sitting in front of the judge, I don't know what the judge is gonna think is material. It's gonna depend on the judge, depend on the time of day, depend on what the judge had for breakfast. So these material terms, you can terminate it on those bases, but it's gonna be one of those things, you never know what the judge is gonna think.
So basically, I heard about this, that let's say you have so-and-so is occupying the property and he's the only person on the lease. And then you find out there's 3 other people living in there. Is that considered material reason? Or
Well, perhaps, but another provision of law allows you to terminate the lease if there's unlawful subtenants.
unlawful what?
Subtenants. So the law specifically allows a landlord to terminate the lease if there's an unlawful subtenant. Now, we don't really care so much about that now, because we could have just terminated the lease in the past for no reason. But over time, let's say after 5 years or 10 years or something like that, and you have a tenant subleasing the property and charging, charging fair market rent for the new tenant, and they're just pocketing the difference between your low rent and the new rent, that happens. Well, the landlord can terminate the lease for that.
How about if they are still living in the property, but they are renting the other rooms, like the
That's
other-
still an unlawful sublease.
Okay, so I just.
If you're allowing, if the law says no subleases, the lease says no subleases, and the tenant subleases, the landlord can terminate the lease for that reason.
Okay, but
Proving it is sometimes difficult.
let's say when you're taking a lease agreement, who's gonna be living in the property, and they list 2, and then you find out there's 5 or 6
Right.
people, would that be?
Well, if they're not leasing it to those people, then
They're
they're not a
not listing
subtenant.
it like, like family members and.
Then it comes back to that materiality part. Now, if these people who are in there are children, like children of the person living there, technically that might be a violation of the lease, but that's not gonna win in court. If the person gets married, it's not gonna win. But if it's just, but what about a boyfriend? What about something like that? Now it's a little bit unclear. What if it's not even clear that they're, in a relationship? Maybe the person is claiming one thing and the truth is another. That's kind of what it becomes.
What if someone's like abusing your property?
Perfect. Nuisance and destruction of property is a basis to terminate the lease. So if the tenant is destroying the property, you can terminate the lease for that reason, or if the tenant is committing a nuisance on the property. Now, nuisance would be loud music, parties all the time, arguing with neighbors, weird smells coming out of the property, that type of thing. Those are all nuisance. Destruction of the property, sledgehammers to the walls, ripping up the carpet, just not maintaining the property, that's another basis to terminate the lease.
Great, how about like somebody else is making the payment? Let's say the lease is under my name
No.
and somebody else makes the payment.
Actually, this isn't part of new rent control law, but the landlord cannot refuse the rent just because someone else pays it.
Okay.
It's a different law that was passed at the same time. So,
If the main person who leased the property has his kids and he moved out of the property,
yeah.
The main tenant moved out while they have somebody
their
else.
kids, somebody else living, they're not like living in
Who's
there.
not on the lease?
Well, if the kids are there and they're adults, then I would think that would be a sublease. Or, you can rent property, not live in it. I mean, that's legal.
Rent a property that you're not living in it?
Sure. Go on vacation take a year vacation, you can move out. keep
So
paying
that's
the rent.
not subleasing?
Well, subleasing is exchange of money.
It's hard to prove.
So, yeah, it's very difficult to prove in that circumstance. But, we're talking about exchange of money here. Someone is paying money to tenants to be in possession.
I don't know why I heard like if the main person on the lease or the people listed on the lease doesn't live in the property, you can, terminate the lease.
No, but really what that's getting at is subleases, where you have a tenant who's got a rent-controlled property, they don't wanna live there anymore, but they also wanna make some money, so they move out and they rent it to somebody else.
They cannot do that.
They can't do
Well,
that,
you can
but you gotta-
terminate
you
the
gotta
lease
find out.
on that, you have to figure it out.
You gotta figure out how the money switched between me
Yeah.
and him.
You have to prove it.
You don't have that, you can't prove it.
I didn't
I mean,
know.
if
He's
a
just my
person's,
friend, I'm hanging out.
so-and-so, I haven't seen him here in 2 years, I think he's subleasing it, and you walk up to the person that's living there and says, who do you pay your rent to?
Mhm.
Your old tenant, I mean, that's how you have to.
Yeah.
But But you
Now-
can move out and give it to your friend, then it's not a problem.
That would be,
And they're
that would be an
not-
illegal sublease, unless the friend is
They're
not paying
not,
any
they
money.
are living there for free, they're saying, I'm not paying the rent, I'm just living in it, and the other person's, it's fine.
Then it's not a sublease.
Yeah,
So
they're
why
fine.
somebody was kicked out of their place because of that? He moved out, not moved out, like he doesn't go to the property anymore and they saw somebody else is living, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like a sublease. Sounds like a sublease.
He was not paying rent to the main tenant.
I'm a little skeptical why someone would live in someone else's property for free. Generally, that doesn't happen unless they're related.
Well, you know.
I mean, it does, I mean, sure,
Doesn't have
especially with
the-
family maybe.
There's many
Or
payments.
sublease, no problem. All right, now here's something significant that I want to cover. If the tenant refuses to sign a new lease, because someone, I think someone asked about that. Let's say you have a 1-year lease, it expires, and the landlord says, I only let people here who sign year leases. Because understand, the tenant can move out whenever they want. It's the landlord who can't make the tenant move out. The landlord can say to the tenant, I only agree to 1-year leases. If the tenant refuses to sign a 1-year lease, or whatever term it is, then that's a reason to terminate the lease. So it's not the case that the tenant moves in under their 1-year lease, the 1 year is up, and the landlord must accept that tenant as a month-to-month tenant.
Must?
That's not the case.
That's not a must.
It's not the case. If they come in as month-to-month, then it's gonna be month-to-month. But if the tenant comes in as a year-to-year, the landlord can make them agree to keep it be year-to-year.
Does it have to be the same, I mean, if they signed originally a 1-year lease, now if I try to get them to do a 3-year and they refused,
1 year.
it has to be the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
or less. Okay. Or less.
You cannot do 1 year and then 2
Yeah.
years?
We don't like this people, you need to do a 5-year lease.
You can't do that.
Gotcha.
That's
Can't
right.
do that.
Yeah.
So you're
25
saying that the tenant
Yeah.
can move out even if they're in a 1-year lease with no?
No, month-to-month.
Okay, got it, okay.
See, you can't terminate a month-to-month lease, but the tenant can. It's not equal in that respect. All right, and now the other one that I'm sure is gonna come up a lot is if the tenant is committing crimes on the property or using the property for unlawful purpose. Now, we've really never had any problems with tenants committing crime on the property, because usually when I see someone committing crime on the property, they never answer. Or they do answer, but it's a crime, so we can terminate the lease. But unlawful purpose, this is gonna come up. What about all these people who are driving the landlords crazy because they're running a business out of the property? I see that more often than you might be surprised. It's unlawful to run a business out of a single-family residence property. Unlawful isn't it violates the local city ordinances. You can terminate the lease for that reason. So,
How would you know, actually,
Well, you have
unless
to
they have a
prove it.
license?
I'll tell you about a case I just had recently.
Okay,
Person was running an unlawful car detail business out of the property. How'd you prove it? A stream of cars, always coming and going.
oh, so you can do that. If you go to a house and you see products, and the products, it's like, sounds like they sell those products, whatever.
If it's unlawful, as in it breaks city laws. Now, what if they just should have had a business license? I mean, at a certain point, you have to prove these things. But the law does allow you to evict someone if they're using the property for an unlawful purpose.
You can take a picture to prove it, or how can you prove it?
Pictures are good, person's seen it, eyewitness is fine. I mean, it depends upon how it's unlawfully used.
The clients can testify.
Sure, row houses, walk in, a bunch of marijuana growing in there. All right, so now let's say there is a couple of exceptions to this, lots and lots of exceptions. If the landlord wants to move into the property, like the landlord wants to occupy it or their family wants to occupy it, then you can terminate the lease. If the landlord needs to substantially remodel the property, structural elements, the landlord can terminate the lease. If the landlord wants to destroy the property, or knock down, so I mentioned that, you can terminate the lease.
Is that like paying them, because I heard like.
And then you gotta pay 1 month, you're correct. You gotta pay the tenant 1 month rent.
1 month rent, why I heard like, it's like $12,000, and if it's.
Well,
senior-
that's a city, that's gonna be a city ordinance.
Oh, this is.
This is statewide,
Alright.
statewide. So statewide ordinance, if you wanna move your family into, let's say, the duplex, and the tenant hasn't breached the lease, you can still terminate the lease. If your family, or you or your family moves in. You just gotta pay the tenant 1 month rent.
And it has to be month to month, you can't terminate. Can you terminate, like, have your lease where?
You can never terminate a year lease early, it's a contract matter, so we're talking about.
How about?
Or you
like-
could just not renew the year lease.
how about moving your kids or your family
Sure,
members?
could do that.
What's considered family member?
It has a list, but it's everyone you would
Okay.
think of. It's like, I think it goes up to grandparents, that type of thing.
Like employees.
Grandkids. Grandparents, grandkids, spouse,
Brothers,
children.
sisters, does it work?
I forget, I can look it up for you.
But you still need to give the 90-day notice.
60 days. I
You could
think.
terminate the lease based upon, well, it's a 60-day notice, but yeah.
60 days.
So even on a lister, on a 1-year lease, 60-day notice?
If you need to, no, this is if you're gonna move into the property. If you're gonna terminate the lease because you're gonna move into it, or you're gonna remodel it, then you can terminate it when you
After 1
otherwise
year.
couldn't.
So what is it, you said that, I heard, okay, so it does not apply here, but in the LA city area, Los Angeles area, you have to file with the city that you're gonna have to evict them?
There,
There's like-
every city has
Has its own?
its own rules on this topic,
Mhm.
but what I'm talking about is the statewide rules now.
Oh, so basically,
Statewide.
at the top of the statewide rules, you have to go to the city rules
Yeah.
as well?
Well, if the city is more protective, then you follow the city rules. If the state is more protective, then you follow the state rules.
Whichever stricter.
Whatever is stricter. Yeah.
So if I wanted to 1031 or just liquidate a property, I can't
Sure you can.
with them in there, with the tenant.
Whoever buys it with those people in it.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you
You do
can't
stop.
evict to sell.
They have to
Correct.
inherit
No,
it,
no,
it's
no.
exactly the way it is.
But you do it, stop.
Now, if it's a single family residence, of course you can.
No, that's what I'm asking, single family.
Exempt, they're not, these rules don't apply to
Got it.
single family
So
residences.
so those don't apply for the eviction, okay.
Yeah. These rules, single family residences, unless they're owned by a corporation, are exempt.
Got it,
None of this
got it,
applies.
okay.
So you just have to serve them the regular notice.
Yes, it's the rule, it's the current rules.
Okay.
Is the 1 month that they have to pay, is it the same as a relocation fee, or are they two different?
Relocation fee is a city rent control ordinance. Actually, I think the law calls it a relocation fee, but it's 1 month rent.
No matter what?
Well, you can actually give them a credit on the next month's rent, which is what I would advise, because you know they're not gonna pay anyway. But I think it's called a relocation fee in the statute.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So given the sort of unfriendly litigation situation in California, would you recommend somebody wanting to rent a house to lease it or rent it month to month?
As a tenant?
Yeah. No,
So as a
lease
landlord.
it to someone else or rent it to them
Well,
month to
if it's a
month?
single family residence, this doesn't apply. None of this applies to single family residence, because it's single family residence. Unless it's a
Even
corporation.
after the new year?
After January 1st, if it's a single family residence,
All you gotta do is give a notice.
these, if you give the notice, none of these laws apply. Unless it's owned by a corporation, or a REIT, or someone here, real estate investment trust, one of those Wall Street retirement devices, it applies to them too. Yeah.
Can you define single-family residence as it applies to the law once again?
This is confusing. It's confusing because single-family residence is a zoning concept or a lending concept, okay? Single-family residence, if you look at the assessor's office, something is called a single-family residence. But what it means under the law is a residential property where there's only one living unit on that property. The legal term is separately alienable, which I skipped using, but one living unit. So like the home that you live in, if there's no one else living there, like a separate family, it's a single family residence. Examples of single family residences are only you live in it, or where there's an accessory dwelling unit. Properties with an accessory dwelling unit are still a single family residence. Rent control treats them differently, but a lender's gonna treat them the same. Yeah.
All right, so if I have a client that wants to buy a duplex and they want to occupy one of them, rent the other, and it's, both of them are tenant occupied, you can't get the one tenant to move out? You're saying you have to buy your duplex and the tenants have to stay?
Well, once the person buys it, they can terminate the lease because they're gonna occupy it.
They can't.
Well, one of them at least.
So after the close of escrow,
Yeah.
then they're free to do.
Well, they could do it now, if it was.
Oh, I mean, okay, so next year.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
someone wants to.
They can
really
buy it
get
and then
the
move
house-
in and terminate the lease.
Okay.
Now, I wanna cover a couple, not part of this rent control, but how the law changed. As of the first, if you wanna raise the rent more than 10%, you gotta give a 90-day notice. If you wanna raise the rent more than 10% in a 12-month period, 90-day notice. In the past, it was 60 days. And here is something that I like to talk about here. It's something for you to think about. The law is greatly emphasizing accessory dwelling units, ADUs. They've been around for a while, but the cities have sort of regulated them in a fashion that made them harder to do. Bunch of laws came out that makes it easier for people to add or keep accessory dwelling units. And more than I can talk about here. But I'll give you one example. The cities used to require that the owner of the property occupy the property in order to have or add in an accessory dwelling unit. That's out. The legislature said no.
In all of Los Angeles County.
All of
All
California.
state,
California.
All of California.
Anywhere.
That's right.
You
So
wanna
let's
start
say you
adding
have a
units.
client and says to them, you know, I need a little bit of extra income. I'm gonna convert my garage to an accessory dwelling unit. Well, the owner of that property still has to comply with local city zoning rules and things like that, but the city can't say to that person, you gotta keep living in the property. You can have someone move into a single-family residence, convert a part of it to add in an accessory dwelling unit, and then immediately move and rent them both out. So the law is sort of is changing there.
So does the R1 zoning, I heard rumor it's going away.
Well, the local cities still have control over this topic. So there's gonna be minimum lot size and sort of technical stuff like that. So
That
what the,
still applies?
Yeah, you gotta
Minimum
reach
lot size?
setbacks.
yeah, all those little rules still apply. But the legislature said there's some things you can't do. And owner occupying is one of them. There's there's a number of laws on the topic.
Let's open this
So,
up.
so to add an additional unit to the property that you're living in,
Uh-huh.
you have to abide by the city rules.
Mhm.
And actually, this is a great selling tool for all of us in real estate, that when we're selling a house to a client, we can tell them, you know, you can add a separate unit that you could rent, and it's gonna cost you this much, and you're gonna reap this much benefit in rent. So that's a huge benefit.
Yes,
Once we
yes,
know,
exactly. It's why I kind of saved this for the end. I want to give a little bit of optimism. I want to talk about something uplifting at the end after kind of rent control for now. So the law, and it's not like there's a bright line rule, no matter where you are, you can add accessory dwelling units. But in the Antelope Valley, we've got some large lots here.
Yeah.
We have some big lots where I can see a lot of people thinking, you know what, I'm gonna buy this property, and I'm gonna build a unit in the back, and I'm gonna rent it out. I could see that. I could see people wanting to do that.
There's a lot of people doing that.
And the law clearly wants to encourage, it's part of the fighting of the rental homelessness, part of the idea about making available more rental properties. So the law is encouraging that, yeah.
Does it still have the rule that you have to rent to somebody low income or medium income?
No, I don't think, I'm not sure that was ever the rule, but it may be in some cities.
It was in some cities.
Yeah, in some cities. I can't really go through every little change, because a lot of it kind of relates to zoning rules. But the legislature just got rid of a bunch of things that cities can't do. And the most prominent one is owner occupied.
you're gonna be selling more homes.
So if people,
Those benefits.
especially up here, we've got some large lots up here, I can see that.
Yeah.
Or, for example, maybe someone says, I have my grandmother, my grandparent, my mom wants to move on to my property, I'm gonna build something for them, but when they're gone, I don't want it to go to waste. Now they have a solution. The person can live there as long as they can, when they move out, they can rent it out.
So if I have a house built back in 1980, right? And I decide I'm gonna put an ADU on the back. And now that I put that ADU on the back, am I in rent control or no? 'Cause I have 2 units?
You are not in rent control because you live on the property.
Okay, but let's say I move out the property.
Then you're in rent control.
Because I have 2 on there?
Now you're in rent control.
But my ADU was just built last year.
Well, then there wouldn't, although,
On the ADU and the house?
I guess it depends. If they issued a certificate of occupancy for the ADU,
Oh, yeah.
then it would be 15 years from then.
Only on the house, or?
On what they issue the certificate of occupancy on.
So what I'm trying to do is all my rental properties, I'm gonna add ADUs, right? But I don't wanna add an ADU and then I'm in rent control.
Well, the law has not been interpreted yet. Okay, no court has interpreted
So my
it.
case is-
Well, that's all. But the law does say any rental property where the certificate of occupancy is issued in the last 15 years is exempt, so
Yeah.
I would
So-
think.
So on those properties, like with acreage, that's
No,
an easy.
Yeah,
I go through like
that's right, as long as you otherwise meet the city requirements or the county requirements.
and don't be right.
That's right. I had a contractor stop by the office the other day
Like 3 weeks ago.
who gave me a plan to convert a garage to an ADU.
Mhm.
Think like a 2-car garage.
Yep.
They put a little wall in, put a kitchenette, and
Have
They're doing
anything
it huge in the valley.
changed to benefit the landlord when it comes to an eviction? Because that law's insane, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I wanna see that law somehow, some way, because anytime we have to evict someone, the landlord keeps eating loss of rent, months and months to get a court date, and after that, we have beautiful Basta coming after us for
Yeah.
no reason. So anything we see changing
no,
in that end?
no. Well, it'll change for the worse. Oh, you don't even wanna know. There is
This tax thing's
someone
gonna kill
right
you.
now is gathering signatures for a ballot measure for next November.
To stop this from happening?
No, for to get rid of vacancy control.
Vacancy what?
There's someone getting, heard of AIDS Healthcare Los Angeles?
Yeah.
It's a very wealthy,
Organization.
public interest group. And the head of it is like the biggest champion of rent control you can think of. He wants to put something on the ballot, he's gathering signatures to put something on the ballot to allow cities to have vacancy control. As in, when someone moves out, the city gets to tell you how much to rent.
Yeah, you can't just. But what about?
I don't know if
That
it'll be on the
was
ballot or
one of
not,
my
they're getting
questions.
signatures right
That
now.
was actually wanted to ask you, with the city or whatever, there's, you cannot rent it more than this, so they can put like, cap on how much.
Well, that's not the law now.
No.
I know, so
That's not the law
basically, it might pass, is it in the,
They're gathering signatures.
What about
to
the
be,
split
to
tax?
pass? To
They're
pass?
gathering signatures to put it on the ballot.
For next year.
For November.
He must be
No, he's the head of the AIDS Healthcare Los Angeles.
San Monica's been called Soviet Monica for years.
Oh, I understand. The guy's name is Harvey Weinstein. I forget his last, Harvey Weinstein.
What about the split property tax they're talking about putting in? Which is basically gonna,
Yeah, I know that's on the ballot.
that's gonna kill us investors. So
Split property
basic,
taxes where they have, where commercial property is assessed at fair market value and residential property is.
or non-owner occupied.
Or that, is assessed, is still subject to property.
Yeah, so they can assess it
That
every
hasn't,
year.
the law hasn't changed in that either, but.
No, they're looking.
It's gonna be on the ballot. So, all right, so let me conclude here, and I'll stay as long as you want to answer your questions. So just the big picture here, someone asked you, if it's multifamily, likely rent control. Multifamily, likely you have rent control. Single family, likely you don't.
How about condominiums?
Condominiums are single family. So, that's it. I'll stay as long as you want.
If you wanna increase the rent less than 10%, how much time you have, how much notice you have?
60 days.
60 days?
30 days.
30 days?
Right now.
30.
In the future.
You're running your motorhome, rent control, no rent control.
So if you wanna raise the rent less than 10%, 30-day notice.
There a maximum a year, how much?
There is no maximum a year, but under rent control, there's a max
Okay.
for
5%.
properties that are not exempt. But even for non-exempt even for exempt properties, you have to give a 90-day notice.
Okay.
It's more than 10%. Yeah.
You did mention that on the single family, no rent control, but if that letter is not sent, then it converts into.
No, it's not.
You know what, man? Can't check them.
You know what? We need to look into what the city can do.
They were buying, so we had a person,
Let's
they don't wanna invest, I mean, so we'll see if there's
Right,
plenty of revenue from that.
yeah,
They don't need,
It's not a lot of.
right.
So that's why they're always trying to. They're always trying to catch up to what they spent already.
Yeah.
It's never like, well, that person's money, now we can see it.
They look amazing. Look at your hair, it's growing.
I know.
If they're gonna sell, they're gonna.
Get out of state. Yeah.
Diagnosis of that.
James Charles has a
Well, they're trying to expand the city.
come by and ask about it, but
That's just, yeah.
Honestly,
And so then they don't wanna buy a house to get.
Tell me about this.
well, the purpose of the trust is to show you.
Last time.
Yeah. Thanks for taking my seat.
Because of the high cost.
I'm really.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and then also.
I mean, they have different purposes.
Right.
The problem with putting no property, no house,
And the rent.
And they live right now.
Oh,
Which is
yeah.
an hour away
Say,
from
well, why did you buy that?
Right.
Well, we don't think it was gonna go up.
Right.
So,
so a lot of people, if they own
700 investment down, you get 2,700.
or
Right.
I'm sorry, that doesn't.
LLCs are good,
And investors are not buying it there.
or you have something where there's so much money, not care about.
I'm just,
Right. Yeah, I send you the year.
Yeah, you know, when you investors or people who
yeah, I
are.
saw it, I'm like, yeah.
They also
You say, look, the guys who are at the banks, Texas,
Yeah, I follow him every week, every time.
Yeah, anyway, so
Well, I don't know, maybe aware of it.
now
Is it,
everybody's
Yes.
7 or 8 a.m.
what happens is,
Right.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
We,
law
so
reduces
that's,
the rent.
I don't know, I'm trying to deal with this thing of tomorrow.
I'll still be up under.
If you raise it now, you go I mean, the way the law looks is March 15th. With the rate, if it's 8.23%, exactly, as related to what the rate was on March 15th.
Yeah, that's how I'm
If you raise it 9%, then the law moves back down to 8.2%.
feeling this month.
Yeah.
You know, he's just saying there's still a few days and.
You could also try,
They're there in that message today, like.
Still got time.
Every day.
2 more days.
Trying to settle us. You know, that was.
3.23%.
Yeah,
Hey, Kathy, how you doing? Good. How'd you like this meeting tonight?
And I'm like, okay,
Today.
that's fair, but there is
I think it's
also,
frustrating.
but then the
And
way
the
that
thing is,
they
I
have
wanted
orders
this
for 4 years.
mode of operation.
Well, that just depends on.
Spread it.
He's just like, I
Well,
don't.
no, I used to work in that area.
No, they're, yeah.
30 years ago,
Right.
30 years ago, when they quit that.
You're never gonna see what it's doing.
Right.
John, you can't friends with
That was
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, what we ought to do is franchise San Francisco, San Diego, and Los Angeles, make them their own state. And then let the rest of the states.
That's not a bad idea. Make little states, California, 1, 2, 1, 3.
Yeah, yeah.
And
There was
this is the
somebody
mama.
that wanted to divide it up, and I would say, well, they took all the city dwellers, let them live in their own stupidity. And rather than put everywhere else, then just.
Right.
So,
unless it's owned by your corporation. Then it doesn't matter.
your own, you know, when I grown up here, this
Me
is my
too.
home.
This week.
So they close?
Like say I want to leave California.
No.
They are.
I mean, I can, but it's
Yeah,
kind of-
house for the last 20 years. When I do appraisal.
Sure.
I mean, who's gonna be left to pay off?
I mean, I charge by the hour for that.
Homeless and all these.
But you got a new
Unless there's
office.
something really, I've got to call
Everyone
out,
who has
right?
a job is
Well,
leaving.
it's not worth it.
So, it's a cost problem.
I mean, I guess, I've done some contracts, transactions that were.
This pen ran out of
Yeah,
ink
they're just.
right away, they're probably. get a
Yeah,
refund.
then-
Possibly doing it.
Yeah.
Better get a refund than cancel.
Yeah, this one too, they all died,
Sentence.
not even one page of notes, and this one
Not
died.
even a page of notes. I wrote one sentence in it, ran out of pages.
I don't know, I'm just like.
Oh, my.
It worked for a minute.
This could be your.
So that's the issue with,
I was told it was done.
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, this,
The problem is.
if I'm gonna draft a contract, I'm gonna read it
Well,
word.
yeah,
You know.
the problem is that
So
I'm
looking
looking
at
at
it once
once
in a time.
The ball.
patterns of
The
people.
car,
with
the
their
car.
For most
prices,
examples.
Yeah.
What they do, and if you're within 7 miles. of
Well, it's the
one
transaction size, is what-
Then you're like, your property is like.
or something weird, like the owner care.
The car stopped.
I mean, I can't
Oh.
think,
So you
I
want
don't
to
recall
be
drafting
within
this contract for less.
away from
From
the
a main
major
road.
arteries,
From
of
a main.
freeway, the main road.
You need
Oh,
a,
that's a good idea.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a
because
good
I have a
I don't
friend
get this.
that's also,
It
actually.
also depends on whether that is involved.
Oh. Oh.
Sometimes you get into representations of warranties, environmental
Some
issues.
town, it's in
It
Idaho,
kind of depends.
which is, I'll
Okay,
Yeah.
I need a recommendation, you're talking
It
more,
was
because I don't have.
like
I don't either.
from
Okay,
IE or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know which
My
road it
father-in-law
was.
passed
It's a
away,
big
he
road.
left my husband,
I said, this looks great.
well,
Yeah.
he made it trust.
Stream running.
It
through
has
it.
a trust.
I said,
It has,
Dehydrated.
it's written
I
down,
would,
you know,
That's a good one.
trust. But when
I would
since I started real estate, I pulled up the title, and it
that's,
doesn't
that's a
say,
deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
I have another friend that.
what's the
she's got
recommendation,
those,
on what do
Yeah.
you need
Yeah,
to do?
either a probate,
Looking at some property.
Even though it's been 3 years and we've already been doing everything. Oh,
so it's either probate,
Oh,
or
yeah.
there's a way, sort of, a way we can avoid a probate.
Anyway, it's a big book, it's a big book.
Someone dies in the property,
Yeah.
generally.
But he has a property check.
Okay, so
Oh, fine.
can I recommend you for me?